Three, two, one.
3, 2, 1. Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Build Something. You can check us out at buildshow.co, and you can get a sense of our past episodes and watch some replays. But just to give a quick introduction, my name is Tom Tate. I'm here with my two friends and co-hosts, and we are here to build something. We are working to build kind of an online community of builders, of people who love to innovate, create, whether they start up businesses, solve problems, build products or non-products, whatever it is. We just love to share our experiences and most of all learn from everyone. And we have a decent idea of who our audience is, but the topic today should really shed some light on that. So let's just go around real quick. You guys can introduce yourself. And then we can get started.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm a creative director, and I've been having a lot of fun meeting people through this blab in this community so far. Can't wait to see what happens this week.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. I'm Megan. I'm a product manager. I share the group's excitement. I'm excited about the unpredictability and meeting new people this week.
Yeah, I just put our link in the chat here. So if you want to check out our site, you can just see episodes 1 and 2 are up there. And I'll kind of give a quick recap of the last topic. So last week we talked about frameworks for solving problems. And the frameworks that we selected are typically used for startups or if you're building a product. And one of the elements in that was consistent throughout was identifying your audience. And that kind of got us to start talking internally, like, have we done that yet? Like, have we done a good job identifying our audience? And like, if you haven't done a good job, where do you start? So how do you find your tribe? How do you find your audience? And then after you do find them, how do you keep them engaged? So we've done a lot of different things, and I'm not going to say they've all been great. I mean, some good, some bad, some indifferent, to try to engage all the awesome people that we've met since starting this, and the people that we've yet to meet. So really those two questions kind of guided us to come up with this topic, which is getting to know your audience. And I'm really happy to see a few people kind of drop in here because we are definitely looking forward to getting to know you two today throughout this episode. So I'm going to open up with a question for Chris and Megan. I guess Megan, you can start first, and then we'll move on to Chris. But my question is, so we are Build Something. We came together 3-4 weeks ago to decide, that we were going to do this thing with a loose definition of our audience. Do we really know who our audience is?
That is the question of the hour. So we had, and I'm sure we'll get into this, a lively discussion about if we know our audience or not. I believe that because we know the problem that we're trying to solve, which is loosely to build a community of builders and makers, that we know that audience. I think that as part of this experiment, we're getting to know them as we go and understanding who that is exactly more. But I think we have a general idea of audience and kind of the we had the privilege of hearing Jared Morris speak of the just start mentality. Sure. And show up consistently. We're trying it and having the benefit of meeting people along the way.
Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Same question. Do we really know our audience?
So I had a different perspective, not on the whole question necessarily, but
sure.
When we were talking about this being the topic for this week, it struck me that I had never really thought about our audience in a meaningful way, other than just, trying to connect people to build something together. Like, that was in my head the extent of our audience, which is really cool and aspirational and fun. But then when I started thinking about, okay, for this show, how do we deliver something of value in this conversation? I realized that I had not thought about this enough. Like, I hadn't thought about where our audience was, like, where are people who want to build something and are building something right now and who have this gap in community. I hadn't thought about any of that. So up until we had that topic, I'm only speaking for myself, I had just been making decisions about what I spent my time on based on what I wanted to do because I thought it was cool, as opposed to because I was thinking about the awesome people that we've been interacting with so far. So it was eye-opening for me, even the idea of the question. And personally, I don't feel like I have as strong an understanding of who our audience is as maybe you guys do.
Well, what is your current understanding? Like, if you and it's interesting because you built our Mad Libs widget, and you kind of took the opportunity to fill it out without consulting us. Not that you had to, right? Like this is totally a I don't know, democracy or whatever.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry.
You didn't consult us on the Mad Lib content that you decided to choose.
Went rogue.
But when you filled out the audience, you wrote inventors and entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is who I think about. Like, I know I err on the side of, when I'm thinking about build something, of building things, like building products or,
Sure.
Physical or digital things. And I think less about the relationships between people. And that, I mean, I guess that is kind of starkly evident in the way that you introduced what we were hoping to do with Build Something, and the way that I think about Build Something, where you were talking about building a community, and I still, like, in the back of my mind, think of, oh man, we're going to build things. It's just an interesting, I don't think they're exclusive necessarily, but it's interesting how we focus on aspects of it that are different. Because like I think about the community, but I think about it as a means to invention.
Things.
Yeah.
To create tangible things that are going to help solve additional problems that will continue to serve the community, right?
Yeah.
So I actually, when I was setting up our SoundCloud page, so for anybody who's just checking in, we do have a podcast that is really just replayed audio from these Blab recordings, and they're hosted on SoundCloud, and I had to write a description of Build Something. So I did not consult with Chris and Megan on this. So we have a nice track record of not consulting with each other, which I love.
We're the group anti-group.
Yeah, it's perfect. But we seem to be on the same wavelength, so it works. But I said Build Something is a weekly show for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, builders, makers, thinkers, and tinkerers. I don't know where I came up with that, and to me, maybe that's too all widespread, all inclusive. But like I think we're all on the same page, right? It's just a matter of now that we have a general sense of who the persona is, and we can talk about what personas are, right? And kind of how to think about personas and define them. And maybe we'll get into that shortly. But I think what we got hung up on when we were talking about this before the show was, now that we have this general sense of who the audience is, where are they, right? Like, how do we find out where they are? Because right now we're very engaged in Blab and Twitter. But is that making the assumption that this audience of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, thinkers, tinkerers, inventors, they're only on Blab? Of course not. So I'm really curious. Megan, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, so just real quick, and you kind of touched on this before, so for those of us joining us today. So persona, loosely defined, is the person that you're solving a problem for. So we talked a lot about how to figure that out. And so for me, the audience is the collection of those personas. So I think that Jonathan J.D. Gadby had a really great question, which is really what we're trying to answer is, how do you go about learning who your audience is? And I think that we are approaching that by experimenting. So we're giving it a try. We generally know the problem that we're solving, and even though, which is what I like about this group, we have a different way of approaching that solution, we're still just putting one foot in front of the other and seeing as we go. Ooh, sorry about mispronouncing your name, Gaby.
I love that the word you describe or you chose to anchor off of there.
That's great.
I think that for us, how do you learn who your audience is just trying it out. And so we're trying out a platform in Blab, and then we'll try other places as well. So individually, we do Twitter, a little bit of social media here and there. I think we have different mediums such as like email marketing we could try out, but we're just trying to see where we can resonate and engage.
Jonathan, do you mind putting in chat like who you are and what you do? Because I think that like one of the best ways to find out and learn more about your audience is just to ask them, ask more about them. You know, so you're here. I mean, this is the first time you've joined us, but I'm really excited that you did join us because now we have the opportunity to kind of ask you and learn about, you know, what brings you to Blab today. How did you find us? Who's your audience? You know, and what are some successful ways that you're doing that? And if you want to jump on the open seat, feel free to do so too. That would be awesome. So yeah, I mean, no pressure, no pressure there. But and we'll kind of keep talking to online communication practitioner. That sounds awesome. So yeah, I think Blab is a really great platform that we've kind of stumbled upon, which allows us to do this. Because if we were just recording a podcast, like there was a earlier question from Purple Select, you know, on SoundCloud, how do you build an audience on SoundCloud? I think that's really more challenging than building an audience through something like this or Twitter, where you really have the opportunity to engage with people. So like for me, I think one of the reasons why we've gravitated towards those two platforms is just the ease in which we can talk to people and also participate. Yeah, Bill Cho, you are not kidding. It's very true. But yeah, just the ease at which you can participate and jump into conversations that already exist. And I think like Medium seems to be taking off. And I think the reason why Medium is taking off is because that's really all it is it's a conversation that's happening. So you can choose to either be in it or not be in it. And I think that when you jump into it, you know, and you have something valuable to say, that's when you start to, you know, potentially emerge as like a tribe leader in a tribe that's already congregating, right? So I think it's about having a strong voice in communities that already exist, but then taking the time to join a conversation and really listen to what's on the other side. Are we trying to build a community on SoundCloud? So that's a question that clicked.
That was me asking Purple
gotcha.
Select.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear that because I've encountered a lot of challenges with SoundCloud just in terms of like getting a sense of there's some metrics on like how many people played our podcast episodes, but yeah, it's very anonymous. You really don't have a sense of who is actually listening, and there's really not too much commentary as well. So that's challenging, and because our podcast episodes are really just recordings of the Blab, we really don't have strong call to actions on those, you know. So like normally if we were doing a traditional podcast, I would say we would end it or we would incorporate strong calls to actions for the audience to really get involved with us, you know, whether it was tweet at us or to email us or join our email list and things like that. And we've really been maybe over relying on Blab to directly interact like in the actual session, right?
Yeah. You know, you raised a really interesting point though about the nature of things like Blab and Twitter, even as opposed to other platforms like YouTube, where Blab and Twitter are just inherently social. Like they're all about conversation. Where, you know, YouTube is a content portal that has social features, and some of the social features are great, but they're really secondary to the content. But like this Blab show would not be anywhere near as interesting as I think it is without people participating while we're doing it, you know? Same thing with Twitter. The reason that it's been such a relatively successful way for us to engage with people is because it's two-way. You know, that's what I think maybe I'm starting to feel and understand about some of our experimentation is when we're interacting with two-way communications, we tend to see more engagement and interest from people. There's less friction to connecting with people there.
So just scrolling through some of the comments. So Olivia says, sometimes your audience doesn't end up being the same as what you thought it was, and that's okay. Iterate on it. And I think that that's really important. So thumbs up, I'll star that one. Yeah, I think that's really important too. And I think that, again, it's the two-way conversations that really help you identify that. But also where you go to attract the audience, because like if your audience ends up not being the same as what you thought it was, that might also impact the problem that you thought you were solving, which could jeopardize the whole, your whole operation of like what you were trying to build in the first place. So if your audience ends up being different than what you thought it was, maybe instead of just kind of like swallowing that pill and iterating on it, which you can do, and I agree, like maybe you've been looking in the wrong place. You know what I mean? And instead of just kind of saying like, okay, I need to rethink my audience, maybe you just need to rethink where your audience might already be having conversations and interject there, which I think is some of the things that we were discussing in terms of just being on Blab and Twitter is like, are we missing out on other opportunities to participate and attract the audience?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, I just thought about like this whole idea of an audience. So like the really strict definition of an audience to me in my head is like a person talking to a group of people. It lacks that dialogue part, that community part. And so, if you're focusing on mediums where there really isn't a community element to it, then maybe you're just kind of setting yourself up for some emptiness. Like you going to a place where you can have the conversation, where you can, build this tribe, where you can have that dialogue. That's the important part, focusing on those things and then figuring out your distribution platform around that is more beneficial.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, so I'm going to say this, and hopefully one of you will help me find a way to say this a little bit better. But one of the things that I'm going to just focus on Blab for right now, that's great about Blab is since it's participatory, and people, what makes it interesting is not just what we're saying, but what how people are interacting with us. That kind of allows us to not have to focus on certain aspects of our content that we would focus on if we were producing something that was strictly like broadcasting to people. Right. So like if you look at my video right now, it looks like super green and weird and things like that. But the benefit of this channel that we're on isn't that people are going to see how beautiful I am, although I am, on Blab and react to that. The benefit here is that they're going to hear what we're saying, and if it's interesting, be able to participate back with us. So that whole long rambling sentence was to just support what you just said, Megan.
Well, thank you. And to not go on too much of a bunny trail, like I think that is the beauty of Blab, and one of the nuances that we're learning is that the production value for us, it doesn't have to be high. We don't have to worry about the lighting, and I mean the mic quality would be good as long as you can hear us. But really, the important part is the conversation and the community building. That is the most important. The other polish isn't as important.
So here's a question, and this is something that we started to talk about and then we stopped. So we started Build Something a couple weeks ago, and one of our kind of immediate impulses was to build a website, right? So I think one of the first things that we did after the initial Blab was, man, we really need a domain and a website and this and that. And, like I set up a quick, AWS bucket, which is probably tech jargon for most people here. And Chris built a website really, really fast that could host our Blab. And we've been sending people to that website. And a couple of these comments, between JD Gaby and Purple Select, are talking about, your podcast community should exist on your podcast's website, via comments and such. So like I am of the mindset, and I feel really strongly about this, that your website, your own carved out little space on the web is really, really important for your audience to have as like your primary touch point, right? Like I definitely agree with the idea that you shouldn't build an empire on rented property So like if we were just Blab all the time, I think that would be a problem, because the day that Blab decides to go Blab Pro, or like something happens with Blab, then like our audience, we lose touch with our audience, right? Like they wouldn't have the ability to see where we're at and where we decided to move on to, and we wouldn't have the ability to interact with them. So I'm curious, because, Chris, you were kind of questioning, was it really that important for you to go and build that website so quickly? And like, is it really serving anybody? And the traffic isn't really that high. So like, we do track the traffic, and I'll kind of share more about that in a bit. But like, I feel really strongly about that. Like, you should have a home, you should have your own platform. But like, do you think that's an issue?
Yeah. So I would love feedback from anybody who's listening to this, because Tom and I have a friendly disagreement about this. And I was gung-ho about building the website and like building little tools and things when we started this. And I still am really happy that we did it. But what I've been thinking a lot about is, when I went to build that, I hadn't given any thought to what I was doing or thought to who the audience was.
Sure.
So like the thing I've been thinking about a lot is, was that the best use of my time if I was really thinking about the community that, we all want to be a part of? Like, if right now, and this is a hypothetical that I don't know the answer to, like if right now our primary audience, the people that we can reach with the least amount of friction and connect with the least amount of friction, are on Blab, wouldn't it have been smarter for me to spend my efforts and my time and energy doing something that was directly going to support, influence, grow the Blab community, as opposed to building a website? That's kind of where I'm coming at it from. The fact that I didn't think about how the things that I was doing were going to actually affect what we wanted to do, and I was just doing something because it was, common knowledge in my point of view that you should have a website.
Megan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting. So I think we have a unique position related to a solopreneur, in that we have our own little community of the three of us, and we each bring a different perspective to this build something thing, which I think is kind of helpful for the conversation, because we all have a different perspective, whereas one person like doesn't have that filter ability. But I think it solves a different problem. And I think we just, using the skill set we had, we stepped forward and gave it a shot. And I think that overall, my biggest thesis on this is, when you're building something, just try it. And so hopefully this community will help those people just trying something, and we can give you some ideas on lessons that we've learned or best practices to do it better. I like our website.
So I'm going to open it up, because we do have a couple people in the room. Does anybody want to join in and talk about their audience, and any success that they've had, kind of finding them and then nurturing those relationships and really staying engaged with them? I know we've talked in the comments a little bit about podcasting, how to grow. A lot of like Cliff Ravenscraft was mentioned a lot, like Podcast Answer Man. Like, Cliff does a fantastic job interacting with his tribe. So I think if anybody has any comments that they want to drop in, by all means, feel free to jump into the seat. Let me just scroll through. Yeah, if you call it build something, yes, I want to see what you build. So do I. I mean, like, and really, this is part of it. So we have, 9 people in this room right now. Like, this is something. Like that's how I feel. Like, this is something. You guys are having conversations about podcasting and growing your podcast audience. That's just independent of the conversation that we're even having right now. So I think that's really cool. Like, these interactions, like, to me, I consider this something, that's kind of happening and is being built. That's really cool. I really like that. So yeah, like, what are we building? I mean, building the relationships that you guys are starting to form right now, just in the chats. Like, that's really cool. So let me go back to like the initial question, which was like, how do you go about learning who your audience is? And I just kind of want to ask, like, are we doing the best possible job? And this is kind of an introspective question, but like, is there more that we can be doing? And if so, like, what would you guys suggest that we start doing?
So Tom actually shared, I'm going to say, yes, there's more that we could be doing.
Sure.
And that's, we have a lot of awesome insights from people just over these past 3 episodes so far. Yeah, I agree with you. Always more that we could be doing. But what I'm really excited about now is trying to take some of those insights that we've gleaned largely through interactions on Blab and trying to learn more about them both on Blab and in different spaces. Tom sent me this awesome article this week about using low-budget Facebook and Twitter advertising buys to learn things about your audience. And the way that basically it works is if you know something about your audience, to spend like $5 or $10 on a Facebook ad buy targeting that audience. And then looking at the results you get back from that ad buy for people who engaged and didn't engage. Because one of the things that you get through Facebook advertising and Twitter advertising is similar interests of people who engaged with your ads. So if you're targeting people based on small business, you're going to get back other interests that those people have. So you might see that with the community of people who engaged with your ads, like say we ran a Facebook ad that was like, build something, connecting innovators and inventors and entrepreneurs. That was the messaging we went out with. We might find some common interests that people had who responded well and clicked through that ad. So maybe we find out that they're interested in robots, or they're interested in cooking, or like a TV show like The X-Files or something. And then we know something new about our audience that we didn't in the past. Like that's the sort of stuff that I think we could start experimenting with. If we're all about experimentation, we can start trying some of these crazier off-the-wall things. And that really gets me pretty stoked.
And I think that's it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask a question for Jonathan. You mentioned earlier in the chat that you ran a survey, reader survey. So Megan, I'll let you answer, say what you were going to say. But Jonathan, if you want to kind of talk about, what are some of the main points that you wanted to touch upon in that survey and the information that you wanted, but also how did you get that survey in front of people? Because I'm assuming that you, in order to successfully run a survey, you have to already have an audience to put that in front of. So I was curious, how did you choose how you got that in front of an existing audience? And a lot of people even pay for surveys, right? So is that an option? Do you pay for data on your audience? Built my email list. That's a topic that we hope to talk about today too. Okay, I'm gonna let Megan answer, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah, I just more had a comment that it is a really exciting time to be building something because there's so many ways that you can experiment that are fairly low cost to you. It might cost you a little bit of time, but you can start a Blab. You can have a Twitter handle. You can publish on various sources, even as a guest blogger on blogs. There's no financial investment that you need to make, so you can try things and see what works and iterate quickly. So I think that's a pretty cool, pretty exciting thing.
So I think now's a really great time to just talk about email and an email list. So we all work for an ESP, an email service provider. So we actually live and breathe email marketing every day. But we've been going at Build Something for 4 weeks now, and we do not have an email list. And that's really, really interesting to me. It's almost borderline bizarre that we don't have a list, right? And I hate the word list, by the way. So that we aren't actively trying to get subscribers to engage with them. Why? Why have we not done that? I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Is it laziness? It might be laziness.
My thought is it's 2 things for me. One is it was more of a challenge and more fun initially to think about building out the website. And our website's kind of fun because it's all powered from a Google Doc, so we can all just update it in a Google Doc, and then it'll update everything on the page. And that was a fun thing for me to do that took a lot of just thinking and playing around and tinkering. And dropping the web form onto the page is almost so easy that I'm always like, oh, I'll get to that when I have a second because it's so easy. And I keep doing that, and because of that, I haven't just done it. So yeah, it probably boils down to laziness on my part.
Sure.
Thanks for pointing me in that direction, Tom.
I feel that way too, but for a different reason, not for the technical aspect, but so like I am a strong believer that people aren't going to give you their email address for free. You have to provide value first in order for them to willingly give up their email address, because nobody willingly wants more emails, right? Like nobody wakes up in the morning, checks their inbox and says, man, I really wish I had more emails today. You know, like people want less emails, right? So you have to, you know, prove your worth and prove your value and prove that, you know, you are, you have a relationship worth forming. And part of that also involves like freebies were talked about. I don't love the word freebie, but like, you know, like a valuable piece of content, whether it's, you know, a PDF or an application or, you know, design toolkit or whatever. Part of it's an exchange, right? You're getting an email address for value. And I think that that's, you know, really important to have. And I think the laziness for me was determining what that value is that we can give someone for their email address. Not saying that we're not providing any value with these blabs and the recordings, but like what value are we really going to give people for the email address in exchange? And I know that we can provide value. It's just I'll put it on myself. I've been lazy in terms of like not thinking about it, determining what that is, and then framing it in such a way that we can communicate it, right? So like until you do that first, I really feel like it's difficult and maybe even fruitless to even attempt starting an email list. Maybe my commitment to the team and to anybody watching is by next blab, we will have an email list on our website that you can sign up for, and something valuable from, if anyone, if anyone, hopefully the whole team, but if anyone, just me, I promise, in exchange for your email address, which we will not abuse.
You know what's so interesting? So this is a little bit of an aside, but I was listening to this new podcast from Marketplace. It's called Codebreaker. And I can't remember what business school it was, but there was a graduate business school. They were talking about email. And they were talking about how at this school, the graduate students have the ability, all of them, to blast the whole class. So it's like 800 people that they're entrusting people with the ability to message.
Sure.
And at a certain point in time, one of the seniors in this business school was like, he sent out an email written in business speak that was basically calculating if it takes 5 seconds for everyone on this list to read this email, and you know they leave school and their average salary is around $97,000 a year. It costs $54 in time every time you send an email. Yeah. So he instituted this thing called the something email tax. Watch or listen to the podcast because it's awesome. But basically it was like if you were going to send an email to this whole group, you had to provide some value in the email. Or you could donate $54 to charity. But the way that he ended his story was with a little joke, which was his way of paying that tax. And it was, how does a pig get to a hospital? Do you guys know?
I do not.
I don't know, Chris.
In an ambulance. But basically, that was the way he provided value. And so what I'm going to commit to is I'm going to come up with either a funny little joke or a picture of a robot or something that's going to go in our emails to pay our email tax.
That's perfect. I love it. So, Megan, I don't know if you've thought about this, but like no email list, like is that baffling? Is it as baffling to you as it is to me?
It is not baffling to me, and I will tell you why. So I agree with like a lot of the ideas that you guys have been putting out there. So one, I believe email is definitely currency, and therefore that makes our email a product. And so I think that the way that we are discovering our product and that we're framing our product is through this social experimentation where we're on Blab, we're on Twitter, we're talking with each other, and we're being very transparent in our ideating. I hate and love that word, ideating process with our community, right? So I think that email is absolutely part of what we'll do, but I think that it's our product that we're going to be selling with the currency of email. So I don't think it's laziness. I think that we're just being very deliberate with that currency.
For sure.
Those are my 2 cents.
And okay, so I'm really hoping that now that we have more people in the room, like if anybody wants to jump on again and just talk about like where you started to build your audience, how that's evolved, where your audience is now, there's an open seat. You guys are more than welcome to. I'm really curious. Sorry to cut you off. Karma Project Co. Has an Etsy shop. Like I have no experience with Etsy or selling on Etsy, so like I'm really curious, kind of like, using Facebook to engage organically. That's awesome, but like, how do you maintain that? Like how do you maintain sales on Etsy and build an audience at the same time, and drive people to and from different platforms to the shop? Like those are the types of things that like I'm really interested in. Chris, you were going to say something. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, all I was going to say is I would encourage people who are in this blab, if you have any willingness to share some of the awesome conversation that's going on in the sidebar right now, seriously, jump into the hot seat. Like I'm looking at some of these comments come in, and frankly, a lot of you guys are much further along in the process than we are. So I'd love to hear from you. How did you first identify your audience, and then what has been the most successful way that you've engaged with them so far? Like whether it's on Etsy or whether it's through podcast. There's this really awesome conversation about podcasting and where you host those podcasts going on. Like I would love to hear more of the background thinking that's gone into those decisions so far and how that's played out for you guys. Because we're at this spot now where we have a high-level idea of who our audience is. We're conversing directly with that audience, mostly through Blab and also on Twitter. But we're looking at next steps, whether it's what experiments do we try next, or what direction do we go in next. And if you guys would be willing to share any of that feedback and insight that you've learned, especially if it was the hard way, so we can not learn it the hard way, we would love that.
And also, what tools and fun things can we build to best serve you guys who are like actively on the Blab and helping out? Like Chris and I have talked about kind of open sourcing our website template, which is actually really a great way to host Blab pages or Blab embeds. So it would be a really great way, for you to just spin up a website so that you're not constantly driving traffic to Blab, but you can drive traffic to your website to watch your Blabs. I think that would be really awesome. And we've already built the Madlib, which Chris, if you have that link and you want to drop it in. Before you do though, I'm going to drop in a quick link for a tool that I love to use, and hopefully others will get some value out of it as well. It's called Dasheroo. So Dasheroo is a great way to track your engagement. It's a business dashboard service. They have a free tier, so you can definitely just try it out for free. And this is by no means sponsored by them or anything like that. I really do love this tool. And what it does is it allows you to sync up with your Twitter account, Google Analytics, Facebook, in different ways. So Robin Rice is calling in, so I'm going to let her in. But yeah, it's really cool. And we're sharing our stats publicly, so you can see like what our Twitter engagement looks like and what our best content is. But I think that's a really good way to keep track. Like use the Twitter analytics and stats, and like use Facebook stats, and like really pay attention to what your most engaging content is, and how much you actually get back from those people, from your audience, so that you can constantly be serving them the best possible way. Search.twitter.com. That's also, that's a great way to find relevant hashtags, great way to find people that you can connect with. Okay, so Robin, are you on? I don't see you, but I'm curious if I can hear you. Nothing. Okay, I'm actually going to kick you out, but try back again. Maybe if you...
Little refresh.
Yeah, if you refresh. Yeah, we'll try it again. Sounds good. But yeah, a lot of good stuff in the comments just in terms of building an audience through your podcast. Jonathan Gaby, again, starting on Twitter, I think that was a really great piece of advice. I think Twitter is the absolute best place to start. The Blab mantra: refresh, refresh, refresh. Yes, I agree.
I love it.
We were having so much technical issues last time, and like it involved switching from Chrome to Firefox and refreshing and doing all these things. So that was really, really great. Use Sumo Rank for your Facebook page analysis. I have not checked that out yet. I've heard of it, so I'm definitely going to check that out. So Youssef, thank you for that. That's awesome. And we'll share that with the group. Robin, can't see you. Can't hear you.
But yeah, like while we're waiting, if you guys stop by the Build Something site and you have any interest in using it to host Blab sites, one, we want to open source it if people want to use it. And two, if you do want to use it, it's still in its really early stages. So, offer feedback. You know what? I'm going to make a serious commitment for next week, Tom. I'm going to post the Build Show template to a standalone GitHub repo, so we can work together to make it something that's actually really cool for people who are hosting Blab shows and want to use it and share it and improve on it. Okay, so we'll definitely do that by next week, and we'll share that repo next week.
Cool. Just a quick, if you just want to +1 in the chats, I'm curious how many people here, either you have hosted a Blab show or you plan to host a Blab show at some point. If you can just +1 in the comments. I'm really curious, like how many of the participants of this Blab are Blabbers, right?
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So, +1 if you've hosted. I'm curious too, like maybe +2 if you've participated but not hosted. So Purple Select, interesting, but I won't go there too technical. Is that in regards to the GitHub repo or Blab? I'm curious. JD Gaby, still too new as a platform. I'm really interested to hear your opinion on that, because like my thought on that is I'm always very hesitant about flavor of the week, social networks and platforms, and really trying to like build a monetized business on something like that. But like my thought on social is every social network that provides you with a direct link between you and a potential audience member, the way that we're conversing right now, like that is worth investing some time in. Maybe not building your entire empire on, as we talked about earlier, but like, just the fact that we're able to talk right now adds some validity to Blab, even though it is new as a platform. So if you want to hop on and talk about it or just chat, I'm really curious about that comment, because I felt that way about a lot of things that don't provide enough interaction, but the level of interaction that you get from Blab really changed my opinion on it pretty quickly. Okay, Purple Select, GitHub is a little technical and complicated, so maybe we'll try to also work on an easy way for people to grab that code and get some use out of it.
Yeah.
Blab doesn't seem to be growing. I don't know about that one. I've been hearing a lot about it from all different networks. Great platform, don't get me wrong. Still too new for average everyday use. I agree with that, right? Yeah. And we've experienced some technical issues, and it's, I think, and we've talked about this before, I think there's a reason why it's still in beta, right? Like why it still has that beta tag is because it's not quite ready for prime time. And I agree, it's got great potential. But yeah, I agree. You shouldn't, hinge your monetized business on something like a platform like Blab. But man, I'm just addicted to interaction, and I love the fact that we've been able to meet some great people, and kind of start talking to these people. Like Megan Carroll, you were here last week, and now you're here this week, and I think that's awesome. So thank you. Cool.
Yeah, and I actually think Blab is kind of the perfect platform for us, for the reason that people have been, mentioning. Like we're new and figuring this out, and we're kind of buggy and whatnot. Like every time when we listen to the recordings of these shows, it's constantly for me like, oh, why did I say that? Just over and over again.
Absolutely.
So we're in this space where, sometimes it's nice that Blab is buggy because it stops me from saying something stupid,
Sure.
But I think that speaks to, what our ultimate goal is too. And I talked about this specifically earlier. It's not about the polish, it's about the connections. So I'm excited about the connections we're building, and who knows where this castle may end up. We might end up on a totally new platform that's not out there. It might end up in, a Google Hangout, who knows? But the connections are the important part, and the communication is the important part. And it's cool to be able to try something new, and bugs and all.
And that's why I think having our website is important, because if Blab does end up not being the best platform for us to interact with the audience and we do move on, like I do want a kind of a home for people to be able to track us to. And that's also why kind of building an email list is important too, right? Because that's another way that we can directly engage with you. That's kind of platform agnostic. All right, we have about 10 minutes left, and there's something that we do every show, which is weekly recommendations. And I want to make sure that we have time for that. I have like the most boring recommendation ever, but I'm excited to share it with you today. But we're not going to start with me. We're going to start with Megan. All
right. So if you haven't been here before, these are not necessarily related to our topic at hand, which mine is not. So today I'm recommending the Hipster Business Name Generator. Drop it in the chat here. But it's a Goofy Friday thing where it will generate a hipster business name complete with logo. And the person who developed this site, you can even get a t-shirt and funny swag. So this provided a nice little giggle for me. It's true.
I love it. I love it.
So if you're looking for a name for your Build Something business, this is where you can go.
And as long as it's like an artisanal spoon carving company, you'll find a name there.
Yes.
Okay, my recommendation this week is I've struggled super hard. This is what I think the most about before we do these blabs, by the way. So
this is the most pressure.
I was kind of anguished over this, but I got it. I'm going to recommend a person this week, and his name is Rory Sutherland. He is just a genius of advertising and behavioral economics. He's the executive creative director at Ogilvy One, and I think he's like vice chairman of Ogilvy in the UK. And he just has an incredibly interesting perspective on people, on life, on advertising, and the way that he sort of found his way into the role that he's in is just a fascinating story. I'm not going to tell it to you, though. You got to follow up on this a little bit. And I have two links that are really interesting in regards to Rory Sutherland. One is a talk that he gave at TED called Life Lessons from an Ad Man, which is my favorite TED talk I have ever seen. It's funny, it's interesting, it makes you think about the world in a completely different way. The other thing I'm going to recommend is a book about him called The Wiki Man. It's really short. Again, it's fun and interesting, and it tells the story of how a guy who has no business being the vice chairman of Ogilvy One or of Ogilvy UK ended up in that spot. Definitely give it a read and a watch.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to put a link.
And Ken Gordon, the name of the TED Talk was Life Lessons from an Ad Man by Rory Sutherland. There's a link up just a little bit.
Awesome. Okay, so I just dropped a link to a book on Amazon, and a lot of you might have already read this book because I think it seems to be like in the canon of business or life help related books that you should read. But it's Essentialism: The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown, and I'm only like a quarter of the way through, but I know that this book is going to be a mainstay for me because what I did was I got it from the library, and within like the first hour of reading it, I actually purchased it and returned it to the library because like I knew immediately that this was a book that I wanted to own.
That is a recommendation right there.
Yes. So like if you're like me and you feel like you're a entrepreneur and you just kind of like float from, you know, shooting star to shooting star to shooting star, and you buy like 15 domain names every time you think of one, you have to check out this book Essentialism, which really is helping me get away from that and focus on the things that are most important, right? So like rather than spread myself too thin and try to do like 18 projects at once, I'm really starting to hone in on the few projects that I think are going to add a significant amount of value, not just to me and my life, but also to the audiences that I'm trying to serve, right? And also making sure that I complete things because I have a really, really difficult time completing things. Like I'm so inspired by the start and like amped up over like starting things. And I love getting things to like 80%, but it's that final 20% that I always lose steam on. As evident in my first novel, which is like, it's like 80% there, right? So I don't know. It's a great book. I definitely recommend it. And if you have checked it out, no spoilers. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyone have any recommendations in the crowd? Like, feel free to drop in. You know, even if you want to just share your own personal projects or your own personal pursuits, you know, by all means, share them with the community. We're excited to check that kind of stuff out. But yeah, this has been an awesome crowd. Awesome chats, a lot of commentary going on that was either on topic with what we were talking about, but also you guys are having your own side conversations, which I think is just fantastic. So read platform, get noticed in a noisy world. Is that Gary Vaynerchuk? I believe, maybe.
Oh,
It looks like it is Michael Hyatt.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I listen to Michael's podcast. Love it. All right,
Awesome.
cool.
I'm just grabbing a link for that really quick.
Perfect. All right, we have about 5 minutes until 3. I really want to try to keep this at an hour. So what I'm going to do is pause the recording, but we'll stick around. And if you guys want to share anything after I pause the recording, we'll stick around for another couple minutes. All right, thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. And just check us out. Again, we have a podcast. You can check us out on iTunes for all the replays. You can check us out at buildshow.co. You can check us out on Twitter at buildshowco. You can check us out on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/build-something. Where else can you check us out? You can check us out on Blab by following us at buildshowco. And you can especially check us out by coming back next week, Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We don't have a topic, but we're going to be presenting that probably Monday or Tuesday. But yeah, this has been fantastic, and we hope to chat with you guys soon and get to know you better, because that was the whole point of today, was to get to know the audience. And I really feel like we accomplished that. And I hope that we've imparted some tools and tips and shared some resources so that you can continue to do the same for yourself. Any final words?
Talk to me on Twitter. I love talking to people during the week, so hit me up. MJ Nesta.
Yeah, same here. I love tweeting. It makes me feel really good. And I mean, I started, this is an aside, feel free to pause in the middle of my sentence, but so Twitter switched from their star to the heart. I started out as a heart hater, but I am addicted to that little animation now. I love it.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a convert.
I do love the animation, but I'm still a little on the fence about the heart. So, all right, again, thank you guys so much. This has been awesome, and we'll see you next week.